I'm standing in the private lounge of the St. Regis Hotel, champagne flute trembling in my hand as my sister Vanessa's laughter cuts through the elegant space like broken glass. "A backyard wedding," she says, loud enough for every guest at her engagement party to hear. "Oh, Caroline, that's so quaint. But honestly, you'll never afford a wedding like mine. Maybe stick to something more your speed, a park pavilion rental?" Her fiancé Marcus Sterling, heir to the Sterling pharmaceutical empire, chuckles beside her while adjusting his Rolex. I force a smile and take a sip of champagne, letting the words bounce off me like they always have. What Vanessa doesn't know, what nobody in my family knows, is that in 6 months, a helicopter will land at my wedding venue, and everything she thinks she understands about me will shatter like the crystal she's holding. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Caroline Mitchell, and for 29 years I've been the family disappointment. Not in the obvious ways. I graduated from state college with decent grades, I have a steady job, I pay my bills on time. But compared to Vanessa, my younger sister by 3 years, I might as well be invisible. She's the one with the MBA from Wharton, the corner office at our father's investment firm, the penthouse apartment in downtown Seattle with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Elliott Bay. She's the one our mother Diane brags about at her country club luncheons, the one our father Gerald parades around at company functions like a prized possession. I work as a grant writer for a small environmental nonprofit called Pacific Northwest Conservation Alliance. It's meaningful work that I love, coordinating funding for wildlife habitat restoration and clean water initiatives across Washington and Oregon. But to my family, it's practically charity work, and not the glamorous kind where you wear designer gowns to fundraising galas. My salary is modest, my studio apartment in Fremont is small, and I drive a 7-year-old Honda Civic that Vanessa once called adorable in a thrift store kind of way. The engagement party is exactly what I expected. 200 guests packed into the St. Regis ballroom, an ice sculpture in the shape of intertwined hearts, servers circulating with Veuve Clicquot and Beluga caviar. Vanessa floats through the crowd in a white Marchesa cocktail dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent, her engagement ring, a flawless 5-carat diamond surrounded by sapphires, catching the light with every gesture. Marcus follows her like a devoted puppy, though I notice his eyes occasionally glaze over when she launches into one of her monologues about wedding planning. The ceremony will be at the Four Seasons, obviously. Vanessa is telling a cluster of her sorority sisters near the dessert table. We've booked the entire rooftop for 300 guests. The floral budget alone is $80,000, we're flying in Ecuadorian roses and Dutch peonies. Vera Wang is designing my dress, and we've hired the string quartet that played at the Vanderbilt wedding last year. She pauses for effect, her practiced smile never wavering. It's going to be the event of the season. I'm nursing my second glass of champagne at a table near the back when my mother slides into the chair beside me. Diane Mitchell is 62 but could pass for 50 thanks to regular Botox appointments and a standing reservation at the most exclusive salon in Bellevue. She's wearing Chanel and her signature perfume, the same one she's worn since I was a child. "You look tired, Caroline," she says, which is her way of saying I don't look good enough. "When was the last time you had your hair done professionally? That style is so plain." I touch my shoulder-length brown hair self-consciously. I'd actually spent an hour curling it this morning, but apparently it wasn't enough. "I've been busy with work, Mom. We just secured a major grant for salmon habitat restoration." She says, her attention already drifting toward Vanessa, who is now showing off her ring to a new group of admirers. "You know, Vanessa could probably get you an interview at Sterling Pharmaceutical. They have a corporate giving department. Real salary, benefits, opportunities for advancement. I'm happy where I am. Are you though?" My mother's gaze returns to me, sharp and assessing. "Because from where I'm sitting, you're 29 years old, single, living in a studio apartment, and working a job that barely pays above minimum wage. Don't you want more for yourself?" Before I can respond, my father approaches our table. Gerald Mitchell is a tall man with silver hair and the commanding presence of someone who spent 40 years running a successful investment firm. He and my mother are a matched set, both impeccably dressed, both masters of the cutting compliment disguised as concern. "Caroline, I was hoping to introduce you to someone," he says, gesturing to a balding man in his 50s hovering nearby. "This is Douglas Pembroke. He runs the commercial real estate division at Pembroke Holdings. Douglas, this is my daughter Caroline." The way he says daughter without any qualifier tells me everything I need to know. Vanessa is always my daughter, the vice president, or my daughter who went to Wharton. I'm just my daughter, the one who requires no further explanation because there's nothing worth explaining. Douglas extends a clammy hand, and I shake it politely while my father continues. Douglas is recently divorced and new to the Seattle area. I thought perhaps you two might enjoy dinner sometime. He's a good man, very successful. Translation: he's available and financially stable, which apparently are the only qualifications I should require. Never mind that he's old enough to be my father or that his eyes have already traveled down to my chest twice in the 30 seconds since we've met. That's very kind, I say carefully, but I'm actually seeing someone. This is technically true, though Alex and I have only been dating for 2 months and neither of us has used the term boyfriend or girlfriend yet. But my father doesn't need to know the details. Oh. My mother perks up with interest. You didn't mention you were dating someone. What does he do? He's in tech, I say vaguely, which is accurate. Alex Preston is a software engineer, though he's also so much more than his job title. We met at a volunteer beach cleanup, both of us spending our Saturday morning picking up plastic bottles and cigarette butts from the shores of Discovery Park. He makes me laugh, he shares my values, and he's never once made me feel like I need to be anyone other than who I am. Vanessa materializes at our table as if summoned by the mention of my personal life. Caroline has a boyfriend? This is news. Why haven't we met him? It's still new, I reply, trying to keep my voice neutral. Well, you should bring him to my wedding, Vanessa says with false generosity. I'm sure we can squeeze in one more guest. The venue has capacity for 300, but we're only at 280 right now. She leans in conspiratorially, though her voice carries across the table. Just so you know, there's a dress code. Black tie optional means black tie required in Vanessa speak. I'd hate for him to show up looking underdressed. The implication is clear. She's already decided that anyone I'm dating must be somehow inferior. Someone who wouldn't naturally know how to navigate the world of luxury weddings and designer wardrobes. I feel heat rising in my cheeks, but I keep my expression pleasant. I'll keep that in mind. And speaking of your wedding, Vanessa continues, settling into the chair Douglas Pembroke has wisely vacated, have you and this mystery man talked about marriage? I mean, you're almost 30. The clock is ticking. Vanessa, my father says with a warning tone, but there's no real censure in it. He's never truly disciplined her, not when she made my childhood miserable with her constant comparisons, not when she spread rumors about me in high school, not when she accidentally spilled red wine on my college graduation dress. What? I'm just saying, Caroline should think about her future. If she wants children, she needs to get moving. And honestly, with her salary, she should be looking for someone established. Someone who can provide stability. My mother nods in agreement. Vanessa has a point, dear. You've always been so impractical about these things. Remember when you turned down that very nice accountant we introduced you to because you said he was boring? He spent an entire dinner explaining tax loopholes, I remind her. He didn't ask me a single question about myself. Well, perhaps if you'd made more of an effort to be interesting, my mother says with a delicate shrug. This is how it always goes in my family. Vanessa sets the tone, my parents reinforce it, and I'm expected to smile and absorb the criticism like it's all for my own good. Growing up, Vanessa was the star of every play, the captain of the debate team, the girl who won homecoming queen. I was the one who preferred reading in the library, who got anxious before presentations, who was more comfortable with trees than people. Our parents made their preference clear early and often. Vanessa's bedroom was twice the size of mine. Her college was fully funded while I took out loans. Her first car was a BMW while I inherited our mother's 10-year-old Camry. The engagement party continues around me in a blur of forced smiles and polite small talk. I watch Vanessa work the room with practiced ease, accepting congratulations and compliments like they're her natural due. Marcus stays close to her side, though I notice he checks his phone frequently and his smile sometimes looks as forced as mine feels. At one point, I escape to the bathroom for a moment of peace. The lounge area is mercifully empty, all cream marble and soft lighting. I sink into one of the velvet chairs and close my eyes, trying to center myself before returning to the party. "Hiding too?" a voice asks, and I look up to see Marcus's sister, Bethany Sterling, entering the lounge. I've only met her once before, at a family dinner, but she'd been kind where others were coldly polite. "Just taking a breather," I admit. Bethany settles into the chair across from me, kicking off her heels with a sigh of relief. God, these things are torture. I don't know how Vanessa does it, being on all the time. It's exhausting just watching her. She's always been like that, I say. Even as a kid, she needed to be the center of attention. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "And you?" Bethany asks, studying me with intelligent gray eyes. "What are you like when you're not at your sister's engagement party?" The question surprises me. No one in my family ever asks what I'm like, what I want, what makes me happy. "Quieter," I say honestly. "I'm happiest outdoors, working on conservation projects. Last month we helped restore a wetland that had been damaged by development. Watching the native plants come back, seeing the first ducks return, that's when I feel most myself." Bethany smiles. "That sounds wonderful, actually. A lot more meaningful than whatever it is my brother does at the pharmaceutical company. No offense to Marcus, but I'm not sure he actually knows what happens in the labs. He just knows how to read the quarterly reports." We talk for another 10 minutes, and it's the first genuine conversation I've had all evening. Bethany tells me about her work as a landscape architect, her frustration with clients who want showpiece gardens instead of sustainable ecosystems. I tell her about my nonprofit's latest project, working with indigenous communities to protect old-growth forests. For those brief minutes, I'm not the disappointing daughter or the lesser sister. I'm just Caroline, someone with ideas and passions that matter. When we finally return to the party, Vanessa intercepts me near the exit. "Leaving so soon? We haven't even cut the cake yet." "I have an early morning tomorrow," I lie. "We're doing site surveys for a new project." "On a Sunday?" She raises one perfectly shaped eyebrow. "That nonprofit really doesn't respect work-life balance, does it?" "This is exactly what I'm talking about, Caroline. You're letting them take advantage of you." "I volunteer for the weekend work," I explain patiently. "I enjoy it." "You enjoy working weekends for free?" Vanessa laughs, that same cutting sound that started the evening. "See, this is why you'll never get ahead in life. You don't value your own time. You don't know your worth." The irony of this statement coming from someone who has never had to prove her worth, who was handed opportunities on a silver platter, is not lost on me. But I don't argue. I've learned that arguing with Vanessa is like arguing with the ocean, exhausting and ultimately pointless. "Enjoy the rest of your party," I say, giving her a brief hug that she barely returns. "Congratulations again." As I drive home through the rainy Seattle streets, I let myself replay the evening's humiliations. The comments about my hair, my apartment, my job, my age, my prospects. The assumption that I'm somehow failing at life because I don't measure success the same way they do. The casual cruelty disguised as sisterly concern. But beneath the hurt is something else. A secret that I've been keeping for 3 years now, ever since my maternal grandmother passed away and left me something that changed everything. Grandma Helen had been different from the rest of my family. She'd understood my love of nature, my need for quiet, my preference for substance over show. She'd been a botanist before she retired, spending decades studying native plants in the Pacific Northwest. In her will, she'd left Vanessa a collection of jewelry and her vintage Mercedes. She'd left me something far more valuable, though nobody knew it yet. 10 acres of pristine waterfront property on Orcas Island, complete with an old-growth forest, a private beach, and a historic lodge that had been in her family for generations. The property had been appraised at $4.2 million, though I had no intention of selling it. Instead, I'd been quietly restoring the lodge, working with a small team of craftspeople who shared my vision of creating something beautiful while honoring the land's history and ecology. The project had taken 3 years and most of my grandmother's inheritance money, but it was nearly complete. The lodge now had solar panels, a gray water system, and geothermal heating. The grounds had been carefully landscaped with native plants that attracted butterflies and hummingbirds. The old dock had been rebuilt to accommodate boats while minimizing environmental impact. It was my sanctuary, my secret, my future. And in 6 months, it would be where Alex and I, assuming our relationship continued on its current trajectory, would get married. Not that I'd told my family any of this. Not about the property, not about my real financial situation, not about my plans. Let them think I was scraping by in my studio apartment, struggling to make ends meet on my nonprofit salary. Let Vanessa have her moment of superiority with her 4 seasons wedding and her $80,000 flower budget. When the helicopter landed at my venue, when they saw what I'd built with Grandma Helen's gift and my own vision, when they realized I'd been living a completely different life than they imagined, that would be the moment everything changed. That would be my sister's reckoning. I just had to be patient a little while longer. I parked my Honda Civic in front of my studio apartment building, the rain now coming down in earnest. The building was old but well-maintained, in a quirky neighborhood full of coffee shops and vintage stores. My apartment was small, just 400 square feet, but I'd made it cozy with plants and secondhand furniture. Most importantly, it was cheap, leaving me free to invest in what really mattered. What my family didn't know was that I could easily afford a much nicer place. The inheritance from Grandma Helen had included not just the Orcas Island property but also a trust fund that provided a comfortable monthly income. Combined with my nonprofit salary, I was actually doing quite well financially. But I'd chosen to maintain my modest lifestyle, saving and investing the majority of the trust fund money. Partly because I believed in living below my means, partly because I knew that the moment my family discovered I had money, the dynamics would shift in ways I wasn't ready to handle. Inside my apartment, I changed out of my dress and into comfortable sweats, then made myself a cup of tea. My phone buzzed with a text from Alex. How was the engagement party? Surviving the family gauntlet? I smiled and typed back, barely. Vanessa was in rare form. How's the code sprint going? Brutal but productive. Want company later? I could bring Thai food and sympathy. Perfect. Give me an hour? You got it. While I waited, I opened my laptop and pulled up the folder labeled Island Project. Inside were hundreds of photos documenting the restoration of the lodge, architectural plans, landscape designs, and a secret subfolder I'd been adding to recently, wedding ideas. Nothing concrete yet. Alex and I hadn't even said, I love you, but I couldn't help imagining what it might look like. A ceremony on the beach at sunset, the Olympic Mountains visible across the water. Dinner in the restored great room with its massive stone fireplace and reclaimed wood beams. Dancing under string lights on the terrace overlooking the Sound. Nothing like Vanessa's wedding, with its forced grandeur and desperate need to impress. Mine would be intimate, meaningful, connected to the land and the people I truly cared about. It would be a celebration of love and partnership, not a performance of wealth and status. My phone rang, and I was surprised to see Bethany Sterling's name on the screen. We'd exchanged numbers during our conversation in the bathroom, but I hadn't expected her to call so soon. I hope it's not too late, she said when I answered. I just had to escape that party and I've been thinking about our conversation. Not at all. I just got home myself. Listen, I know this might seem forward, but my firm is looking for someone to consult on a project, a corporate campus that wants to incorporate native landscaping and habitat restoration. It's not my usual thing, but the client specifically requested an ecological approach. Would you be interested? My heart skipped. This was exactly the kind of work I loved, and the kind of project that could really showcase what my nonprofit could do. Absolutely. Can you email me the details? I'll send them over tomorrow. And Caroline? I'm glad we got to talk tonight. I think we could actually be friends, not just people who tolerate each other at family events. After we hung up, I sat for a moment feeling hopeful. Maybe something good could come from this evening after all. When Alex arrived an hour later with bags of pad thai and spring rolls, I was in a better mood. So, he said, settling onto my couch and pulling me close. Tell me everything. Did your sister really say you'll never afford a wedding like hers? Among other things. I filled him in on the highlights, or lowlights, of the evening, and he listened with a mix of sympathy and outrage. Your family is kind of awful, he said when I finished. No offense. None taken. They are. Have you ever thought about just telling them? About the island, the inheritance, everything? I'd asked myself this question 1,000 times. Sometimes. But then I think about how they'd react. My mom would immediately start planning how I should spend the money, probably trying to convince me to sell the property and invest in something sensible. My dad would want to manage my finances. And Vanessa. I trailed off. Vanessa would lose her mind, Alex finished. Exactly. Right now, she gets to feel superior to me. She has the better job, the richer fiancé, the more impressive life. If she found out I actually have more than her, that I've been quietly building something amazing while she was busy showing off, I don't know what she'd do. So you're just going to keep it secret forever? Not forever. Just until the time is right. I took a bite of pad thai, considering. Actually, I've been thinking. If we're still together in a few months, would you want to visit the island? I could show you the lodge. Alex set down his food and turned to face me fully. Caroline, we need to talk about something. I know we've been taking things slow, and I respect that. But I need you to know that this isn't casual for me. I'm falling in love with you. I've been falling in love with you since that day at the beach cleanup when you gave that impromptu lecture about microplastics to those teenagers and they actually listened. My breath caught. Really? Really? And I know your family makes you feel like you're not enough, but you're everything to me. You're brilliant and passionate and kind. You care about things that matter. You're building a life based on your values, not on impressing people or accumulating status symbols. That's rare, Caroline. That's valuable. I felt tears prick my eyes. I'm falling in love with you too. Good, he said, pulling me closer. Because I was thinking, in about 6 months, when you've had time to really be sure about us, maybe I could ask you an important question. And maybe we could have a wedding at that island property you keep not quite telling me about but that I've definitely figured out you own. I pulled back to look at him in surprise. How did you know? He grinned. You underestimate my stalking skills. Also, you sometimes get emails on your phone from someone named Lodge Restoration Team, and I'm a curious person. I didn't dig into the details because I figured you'd tell me when you were ready, but I put 2 and 2 together. And you're okay with me keeping it secret? From everyone? It's your secret to keep or share as you choose. I trust your judgment. He paused. Though I have to admit, the thought of your sister's face when she realizes what you've been hiding is extremely satisfying. We spent the rest of the evening talking about the future in a way we never had before. Alex told me about his own dreams, to eventually start a tech company focused on environmental solutions, using artificial intelligence to optimize resource conservation. I told him about my vision for the island property, not just as a home but potentially as a retreat center for environmental education. We could host school groups, I said, warming to the idea. Teach them about native ecosystems, sustainable living, the importance of conservation. Use it as a living laboratory. Or retreat programs for burnout tech workers who need to reconnect with nature, Alex added. God knows I could have used something like that at my last job. It was the first time I'd allowed myself to dream out loud about what the property could become. With my family, I'd always felt the need to minimize my aspirations, to make myself smaller so Vanessa could shine brighter. But with Alex, I could be expansive. I could imagine possibilities. That night, after he left, I lay in bed thinking about the path ahead. 6 months until Vanessa's wedding. 6 months to see if what Alex and I had was real and lasting. 6 months to decide when and how to reveal the truth to my family. The old Caroline would have stayed silent forever, would have let her family continue believing whatever they wanted about her life. But I was changing, growing into someone who could stand firm in her own worth regardless of external validation. Grandma Helen had given me more than property and money. She'd given me the foundation to build a different kind of life, one aligned with my values and my vision. And when the time came, when that helicopter landed at my wedding venue and my family finally saw what I'd created, I wouldn't be doing it to prove them wrong or to get revenge. I'd be doing it to show them, and myself, that there are many ways to build a meaningful, successful life. That quiet strength is still strength. That the person they'd underestimated their entire life had been playing a completely different game all along. I just had to be patient a little while longer. The weeks following Vanessa's engagement party settled into a familiar rhythm of work, secret island visits, and navigating my family's continued dismissiveness. Spring was transitioning into early summer, and the Pacific Northwest was showing off with endless days of blue skies and blooming rhododendrons. At the nonprofit, we just won a major grant to expand our wetland restoration program, which meant I was spending more time in the field and less time behind a desk. It was exactly what I needed. On a Tuesday morning in late April, I was coordinating a volunteer planting event along the Snoqualmie River when my phone rang with my mother's ringtone. I almost didn't answer, knowing she only called when she wanted something, but professionalism won out. "Caroline, I need you to do something for me," Diane said without preamble. No hello, no how are you, just straight to the demand. "Vanessa is having her final dress fitting this Saturday at the Vera Wang boutique, and she wants the whole family there. You need to clear your schedule." I looked down at the mud on my boots, the native sedges waiting to be planted, the volunteers already gathering with their shovels and work gloves. "Mom, I'm leading a restoration project on Saturday. I can't just cancel on 30 volunteers who've committed their time. This is your sister's wedding dress fitting, Caroline. Surely your little gardening hobby can wait one weekend." The dismissal in her voice made my jaw clench. It's not a hobby. It's my job. And these projects are scheduled months in advance. Well, reschedule it. This is a family obligation. My mother's tone shifted to that particular blend of guilt and manipulation she'd perfected over the years. "Vanessa specifically requested that you be there. She's trying to include you, to make you feel part of the wedding preparations. The least you could do is show up and be supportive." I wanted to point out that Vanessa had never been supportive of anything I'd done, that family obligations seemed to only run in one direction, that my work actually mattered to people beyond our immediate social circle. Instead, I said, "I'll see what I can do." "That means you'll be there. Saturday at 2. The boutique is in downtown Seattle, and afterward we're having champagne at the Columbia Tower Club. Dress nicely, please. It's an upscale establishment." She hung up before I could respond, leaving me staring at my phone with frustration bubbling in my chest. One of the volunteers, a retired teacher named Patricia who'd been helping with our programs for years, noticed my expression. "Family trouble?" she asked sympathetically. "My sister's wedding," I said with a sigh. "Apparently I'm supposed to drop everything to attend a dress fitting." Patricia smiled knowingly. I had a sister like that. Everything was always about her, and the rest of us were just supporting characters in the drama of her life. Until one day I decided to write my own story instead of playing a role in hers. Her words stayed with me through the rest of the morning as we planted native vegetation along the riverbank. By lunchtime, I'd made a decision. I would go to the dress fitting, but I wouldn't cancel the restoration project. Instead, I'd delegate leadership to Miguel, my assistant coordinator who was more than capable of running the event. I'd show up for my family obligation, but I wouldn't sacrifice my commitments to do it. Saturday arrived with typical Seattle spring weather, alternating between sunshine and brief rain showers. I spent the morning at the river site making sure Miguel had everything he needed, then drove back to my apartment to change. I selected a simple navy dress and flats, knowing that whatever I wore would be deemed insufficient by my mother's standards but refusing to stress about it. The Vera Wang boutique was exactly as pretentious as I'd imagined, all white marble and crystal chandeliers, with assistants who looked like they'd stepped out of a fashion magazine. I arrived to find my mother already there, along with Vanessa's 3 bridesmaids, Marcus's mother Cecilia Sterling, and his sister Bethany, who gave me a warm smile as I entered. Finally, Vanessa said, emerging from the dressing area in a robe. I was beginning to think you weren't coming. Let me guess, you were out playing in the dirt somewhere? Working, I corrected mildly, taking a seat beside Bethany. The Snoqualmie restoration project I mentioned. Right, the thing you couldn't possibly reschedule for your only sister's dress fitting. Vanessa's voice carried that edge of wounded martyrdom she'd mastered as a teenager. Well, you're here now, so I suppose that's what matters. The boutique manager, a severe woman named Margot, clapped her hands for attention. Shall we begin? Miss Mitchell, if you'll step into the fitting room, we'll get you into the gown. What followed was an hour of watching Vanessa parade around in a dress that probably cost more than most people's cars, demanding adjustments to already perfect seams and debating the merits of various veil lengths. The dress itself was admittedly stunning, a strapless mermaid style with intricate beading that caught the light with every movement. Vanessa looked beautiful in it, and she knew it. What do you think, Caroline? She asked, striking a pose in front of the 3-way mirror. Be honest. It's gorgeous, I said truthfully. You look like a princess. A princess, she repeated with a laugh. I was going for more sophisticated glamour, but I suppose princess works for a wedding. She turned to study her reflection from another angle. Of course, the dress is only one element. The venue, the flowers, the music, they all have to work together to create the right atmosphere. Marcus and I have been so meticulous about every detail. Cecilia Sterling, an elegant woman in her 60s who'd been mostly quiet until now, spoke up. I'm sure it will be lovely, dear. Though I must say, sometimes the most memorable weddings are the intimate ones, not necessarily the most expensive. Vanessa's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Oh, ours will be memorable, I can assure you. We're sparing no expense to make it perfect. My mother beamed with pride. She's been planning this since she was a little girl. Every detail matters when it's the most important day of your life. I couldn't help myself. Is it though? The most important day of your life? All eyes turned to me, and I felt my face flush. I just mean, isn't the marriage more important than the wedding? The actual partnership you're building, not just the party. Vanessa's expression could have frozen water. Of course the marriage is important, Caroline. But the wedding is the public declaration of that commitment. It's about celebrating with the people we love, creating memories, honoring tradition. Not that you'd understand, given your apparent plan to get married in someone's backyard. I never said anything about getting married in a backyard. But you're dating someone, aren't you? That tech person you mentioned? Vanessa adjusted the bodice of her dress while watching me in the mirror. Have you even introduced him to the family yet? Or is he embarrassed to meet us? We're taking things at our own pace, I said carefully. Not everyone needs to rush into things. Rush? Marcus and I dated for 2 years before getting engaged. That's hardly rushing. Vanessa turned away from the mirror to face me directly. But then again, you've always been slow about everything. Slow to finish college, slow to figure out your career, slow to find someone who'll actually commit to you. I suppose slow engagement would be on brand. The bridesmaids exchanged uncomfortable glances. Even my mother looked slightly uneasy at Vanessa's tone, though she didn't intervene. It was Bethany who broke the tension. I think Caroline's approach sounds healthy, actually, she said firmly. Building a strong foundation before making big commitments. That's wisdom, not slowness. Vanessa's eyes narrowed as she looked at her future sister-in-law. Of course you take her side. You've always had this thing about defending the underdog. I'm not taking sides, Bethany replied calmly. I'm just suggesting that different approaches to relationships are equally valid. Not everyone wants or needs a 3 seasons wedding with 300 guests. 4 Seasons, Vanessa corrected coldly. We're having it at the 4 Seasons. The fitting continued with an icy politeness that made everyone uncomfortable. When it was finally over and we'd moved to the Columbia Tower Club for champagne, I found myself standing at the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out over Elliott Bay and the Olympic Mountains beyond. From 76 floors up, the city looked like a toy model, all tiny buildings and miniature boats. Quite a view, a voice said beside me, and I turned to find Marcus holding 2 champagne flutes. He offered me one. Though I'm guessing you see better ones in your work. Different ones, I said, accepting the glass. More intimate. Less impressive from a height perspective, but more alive. I'd like to hear about that sometime, he said, and something in his tone made me look at him more carefully. He seemed tired, the enthusiasm I'd seen at the engagement party dimmed somehow. Vanessa mentioned you work in conservation? Wildlife habitat restoration, mostly. Right now we're focused on salmon-bearing streams and wetlands. That sounds meaningful. He took a sip of champagne. A lot more meaningful than pharmaceutical profit margins and market share reports. Before I could respond, Vanessa appeared at his elbow. Marcus, darling, Mother Sterling wants to discuss the rehearsal dinner menu. Caroline, you don't mind if I steal him away, do you? Of course not, I said, watching as she linked her arm through his and guided him toward his mother. But not before I caught the flash of something in his expression that looked almost like relief at being pulled away from whatever conversation we'd been starting. The afternoon dragged on with endless wedding talk. Seating charts and menu selections, debates about whether to have a photo booth or a live painter, discussions of which songs were appropriate for the father-daughter dance. I contributed where required, smiled when expected, and counted the minutes until I could politely excuse myself. Finally, at nearly 6 o'clock, I made my escape. I was almost to the elevator when Bethany caught up with me. Hey, wait up, she said, slightly breathless. I wanted to talk to you about that consulting project I mentioned. Do you have time for coffee this week? We made plans to meet at a cafe near her office on Wednesday, and I felt genuine pleasure at the prospect. Bethany was becoming a real friend, someone who saw me as a person rather than Vanessa's lesser sister. As I drove home through the early evening traffic, I allowed myself to daydream about my own wedding plans. Alex and I had been talking more seriously about our future. We'd said I love you, we'd discussed moving in together, and just last week he'd casually mentioned looking at engagement rings online. Nothing was definite yet, but the trajectory was clear. And when the time came, when we were ready to make that commitment, our wedding would be nothing like Vanessa's production. I imagined it clearly. A ceremony on the beach at the island property, maybe 100 guests at most. People who actually knew us and cared about us, not business contacts and social obligations. Dinner in the lodge's great room with its soaring timber beams and stone fireplace. Music from a local folk band, not an orchestra. Flowers from the island's own gardens, not imported from Ecuador. Real, authentic, meaningful. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity. The restoration project was going well, with volunteers showing up in record numbers. The consulting work with Bethany's firm was challenging but rewarding, giving me a chance to influence corporate sustainability practices at a larger scale. And my relationship with Alex continued to deepen in ways that felt both exciting and comfortable. We spent a weekend in May at the island property, Alex's first visit to what I'd been working on for the past 3 years. I'd been nervous about showing him, worried he might not understand my vision or might think I was crazy for sinking so much money and time into the restoration project. But his reaction exceeded all expectations. Caroline, this is incredible, he said, standing on the lodge's wraparound porch and looking out at the water. You built this? You actually created this? With a lot of help, I said modestly. The restoration team, the architects, the craftspeople. But yes, this is my project. He pulled me close, kissing my forehead. This is who you really are. Not the person your family sees, the one who's supposedly struggling to make ends meet. This is your truth. We spent the weekend hiking the property's trails, swimming in the cold, clear water, planning where we might add vegetable gardens or extend the native plant landscaping. Alex had ideas about solar optimization and water conservation systems. I showed him my dreams for education programs and community access. Together, we envisioned a future that honored both environmental stewardship and human connection. On Sunday evening, as we sat on the dock watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold, Alex took my hand. "I want to spend my life with you," he said simply. "I want to build this future together, whatever it looks like. I want to wake up in this place 50 years from now and remember this moment." "Are you asking me something?" My heart was racing. "Not yet. Not officially. I want to do it right, with a ring and a plan and all the romance you deserve. But I wanted you to know that it's coming. That I'm sure." "I'm sure too," I whispered, leaning my head on his shoulder. We drove back to Seattle late that night, and I felt different somehow. More solid in my sense of self, more confident in the path ahead. When Vanessa texted the next morning with another wedding-related demand, I felt the familiar irritation but also something new. A sense of perspective. Her wedding was important to her, and I could support her without letting it diminish my own journey. The text read, "Family dinner at Mom and Dad's this Friday. Marcus's parents will be there. Wear something nice and please try not to talk about work the entire time. Nobody wants to hear about dirt and fish." I responded simply, "I'll be there." Friday arrived with unusually warm weather for late May. I chose a coral-colored dress I'd bought specifically for Vanessa's wedding-related events, paired with simple jewelry and sandals. When I arrived at my parents' home in the affluent suburb of Medina, Marcus's family was already there, along with Vanessa and a catered spread that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Dinner was the usual performance. My father held court at the head of the table, discussing market trends and investment strategies with Marcus's father. My mother and Cecilia Sterling compared notes on country club amenities and upcoming charity galas. Vanessa orchestrated the conversation like a conductor, ensuring she remained the center of attention while making sure to highlight Marcus's accomplishments and their future plans. I was seated between Bethany and Marcus's younger brother, Trevor, a college student who seemed far more interested in his phone than the conversation around him. Bethany and I talked quietly about the consulting project, which was progressing well, while the main table discussion swirled around us. "So Caroline," Cecilia Sterling said during a lull in conversation, "Vanessa mentioned you work for a nonprofit. How noble. What exactly do you do there?" The way she said "noble" made it clear she considered it more naive than admirable. "I coordinate habitat restoration projects," I explained. "Wetlands, riparian zones, native forest preservation. We work with landowners, government agencies, and indigenous communities to restore damaged ecosystems." "How interesting," she said in a tone that suggested it was anything but. "And that provides enough to live on?" Before I could answer, Vanessa jumped in. "Barely. Caroline lives in a tiny studio apartment in Fremont and drives a car that's nearly a decade old. But she loves the work, so I suppose that's what matters." "Passion is important," my father agreed, though his tone suggested it wasn't as important as financial success. "Though at some point, Caroline, you might want to consider your long-term security. That nonprofit salary won't fund retirement or provide for a family." "I'm financially secure, Dad," I said evenly. "I live within my means and save consistently." My mother laughed lightly. "Living within modest means is hardly the same as building real wealth, dear. This is exactly why we keep encouraging you to consider other opportunities." "Marcus, didn't you mention that Sterling Pharmaceutical has corporate social responsibility positions?" Marcus looked uncomfortable being put on the spot. "We do have a CSR department, yes, but I'm not sure, perfect." My mother clapped her hands as if it was settled. "Caroline, you should send Marcus your resume. I'm sure he could put in a good word for you." "I'm happy where I am," I said firmly. "I'm not looking for a new job." "You say that now," Vanessa interjected, "but what about when this tech boyfriend of yours wants to settle down? Assuming he exists and isn't just someone you made up to avoid blind dates. Are you planning to raise children in that studio apartment?" The casual cruelty of suggesting I'd invented Alex stung more than I wanted to admit. Alex is very real, and we have plans that don't concern anyone at this table. Plans, Vanessa repeated with a smirk. Is that what we're calling vague hopes now? Because from where I'm sitting, you're nearly 30 with no ring, no real career prospects, and no plan beyond your idealistic nonprofit work. Vanessa, that's enough, my father said, but without much force behind it. I'm just being honest, she protested. Someone needs to give Caroline a reality check. She's living in a fantasy world where good intentions pay the bills and true love conquers all. That's not how the real world works. And how does the real world work, Vanessa? The words were out before I could stop them. You marry someone wealthy, throw an absurdly expensive wedding to prove your worth, and spend the rest of your life accumulating things you don't need to impress people you don't like? The table went silent. My mother's mouth opened in shock. Marcus looked down at his plate. Vanessa's face flushed red with anger. How dare you, she said quietly. I'm marrying Marcus because I love him, not for his money. I'm sure that's true, I said, though I wasn't sure at all. Just like I'm sure your love requires a 5-carat ring and an $80,000 flower budget. Girls, please, my mother attempted to intervene. This is supposed to be a pleasant family dinner. But Vanessa wasn't finished. You're just jealous because you know you'll never have what I have. You'll never afford a wedding like mine, never wear a dress like mine, never have a husband who can actually provide for you. You'll always be the struggling do-gooder while I'm living the life we both grew up dreaming about. We didn't both dream about that life, I said calmly, surprised by how steady my voice was. You dreamed about wealth and status and being the center of attention. I dreamed about making a difference, about building something meaningful, about living according to my values rather than other people's expectations. Well, congratulations on your values, Vanessa shot back. I'm sure they keep you warm at night in your 400-square-foot apartment. I stood up, placing my napkin on the table. Thank you for dinner. I think I'll be going now. Caroline, sit down, my father commanded. We're not finished. I am, I said. Enjoy your evening. I walked out of that house with my head high, got into my elderly Honda Civic, and drove away from the life my family had mapped out for me. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel, adrenaline coursing through my veins. I'd never stood up to them like that before, never so directly challenged the family narrative that I was the disappointment while Vanessa was the success. My phone started buzzing before I'd made it 2 blocks. First my mother, then my father, then Vanessa. I sent them all to voicemail. But when Bethany's name appeared on the screen, I pulled over to answer. Are you okay? She asked immediately. That was intense. I'm fine. Actually, I'm better than fine. I'm done apologizing for who I am. Good, Bethany said firmly. Because they're the ones who should apologize. The way they talk to you, about you, it's not okay. And for what it's worth, I think you're incredible. Your work matters. Your choices are valid. And Vanessa's just threatened because she knows you don't need what she has to be happy. After we hung up, I drove to Alex's apartment instead of my own. He took one look at my face and pulled me into his arms. Bad family dinner, he asked, and I laughed despite everything. The worst. Or maybe the best. I finally told them what I really think. Good for you. He kissed the top of my head. Want to tell me about it? Over pizza and beer, I recounted the entire disastrous evening. Alex listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker as I described the insults and dismissals. They're wrong about everything, he said when I finished. You know that, right? Your work is important. Your life is meaningful. And you're going to have an amazing wedding that puts Vanessa's to shame, not because it costs more but because it will actually reflect who you are. I'm starting to think I shouldn't even invite them, I admitted. Why would I want people there who don't respect me or support me? That's your decision to make, Alex said carefully. But remember, you're doing this for you, not to prove anything to them. When we get married, it should be about us and our future, not about showing them up. He was right, of course. But I couldn't deny the small, petty part of me that wanted Vanessa to see what I'd built. Wanted my parents to realize how wrong they'd been about me. Wanted all of them to understand that their narrow definition of success had blinded them to other possibilities. "Can I show you something?" I asked, pulling out my phone. I opened the folder of island photos I'd been compiling, images of the restored lodge, the native gardens, the beach at sunset. "This is what I've been working on. This is where I want to have our wedding, when the time comes." Alex studied each photo carefully, zooming in on details, asking questions about the restoration process and the property's history. "This is yours?" he finally asked. "You own this?" "My grandmother left it to me. I've spent the last 3 years bringing it back to life." "And your family doesn't know?" "No." He looked at me for a long moment. "That must be quite a burden, keeping this secret." "Sometimes," I admitted. "But mostly it feels like freedom. This place is mine in a way nothing else has ever been. It's not connected to my family's expectations or judgments. It's pure possibility." "When are you going to tell them?" I thought about Vanessa's face at dinner, her absolute certainty that she knew everything about my life and capabilities. "Soon," I said. "Very soon." The invitation arrived in early June, cream cardstock with gold embossed lettering that probably cost more per square inch than my monthly grocery budget. Vanessa and Marcus cordially invited me to their wedding at the Four Seasons Hotel, Seattle. Black tie required. No +1 indicated, despite Alex and I having been together for nearly 8 months by that point. I called Vanessa immediately. "The invitation says no guest. Am I not allowed to bring Alex?" "We're keeping the guest list tight," she said breezily. "Only serious, committed couples get +1s. You and this tech guy haven't even been together a year. Besides, you never introduced him to the family, so how would we know if he's real?" "That's because every time I try to bring him to family events, you find a reason to exclude him." "Well, maybe at the reception you can meet some of Marcus's single friends. There are several very successful men who'll be there." I hung up before I said something I'd regret. Alex was philosophical when I told him. "It's fine. I'll take you to dinner that night instead. Somewhere actually fun." But it wasn't fine. It was another dismissal, another way of telling me that my choices and my relationships didn't measure up to their standards. I stared at that invitation for days, debating whether to even attend. Then inspiration struck during a morning run along the Burke-Gilman Trail. I would go to Vanessa's wedding. I would smile and congratulate her and be the gracious sister she expected. And then, exactly 1 month later, would get married at the island property. I would invite everyone who mattered, including our parents and Vanessa. And when that helicopter landed with supplies for the reception, when they saw what I'd built while they'd been underestimating me, that would be my moment. Alex and I had been talking about marriage more seriously anyway. That evening, I told him my plan. "I know this sounds crazy," I said, "but what if we did it? What if we actually got married this summer?" "Are you proposing to me?" he asked with a grin. "Maybe. Would you say yes?" He pulled me close. "I'd say yes if you proposed in a grocery store parking lot. But I'd rather do this right. Give me 2 weeks to find the perfect ring and plan something romantic. Then I'll ask you properly." True to his word, 2 weeks later Alex took me back to Discovery Park where we'd first met. We walked to the beach at sunset, and there, with the Olympic Mountains framing the horizon and the sound of waves gentle against the shore, he got down on one knee. "Caroline Mitchell, you're the most extraordinary person I've ever known. You see the world not as it is but as it could be, and then you do the work to make it better. I want to spend my life building that better world with you. Will you marry me?" The ring was simple and perfect, a sapphire surrounded by tiny diamonds that caught the fading light. "Yes," I said through happy tears. "Absolutely yes." We set the date for exactly 1 month after Vanessa's wedding. I hired a wedding planner who specialized in eco-conscious events, someone who understood my vision for a celebration that honored the land and our values. We kept the guest list small, just 90 people who actually knew us and cared about our relationship. I arranged for boat transportation from Anacortes to the island, chartered a helicopter for supplies and anyone with mobility issues, and worked with a local caterer who sourced everything from island farms. The only people I told about the engagement were Bethany and my grandmother's best friend, Dorothy, who'd been like a second grandmother to me growing up. I didn't tell my parents or Vanessa. Let them find out with everyone else. Vanessa's wedding day arrived with perfect weather, warm and clear. The Four Seasons rooftop was transformed into a floral wonderland, exactly as she'd envisioned. I watched my sister marry Marcus in front of 300 guests, her Vera Wang dress gleaming in the afternoon sun, her smile absolutely radiant. She looked happy, and for all my complicated feelings about her, I genuinely hoped she was. At the reception, I sat at a table with distant cousins who barely acknowledged me. I watched Vanessa dance her choreographed first dance with Marcus, watched my parents beam with pride during the toasts, watched the elaborate 5-tier cake get cut and served. It was beautiful and expensive and perfectly executed. It was also completely impersonal, a production designed to impress rather than a celebration of love. When Vanessa threw her bouquet, I didn't even try to catch it. When the DJ played the last song and guests began filtering out, I congratulated my sister one final time and slipped away into the night. Tomorrow I would mail my own wedding invitations. Tomorrow the real countdown would begin. The invitations went out the next morning, simple recycled paper with hand-drawn native plants bordering the text. Caroline Mitchell and Alex Preston invited family and friends to witness their marriage on Orcas Island. Transportation would be provided from Anacortes. Lodging available at the on-site guest house and nearby inns. Casual dress encouraged. Ceremony at sunset on the beach. My parents called within hours of receiving theirs. Orcas Island, my mother said, confused. How on earth are you affording a destination wedding? And you're engaged? When did this happen? Recently. You'll get all the details when you arrive. Will you be coming? Of course we'll be coming. But Caroline, this seems very rushed. Are you sure about this? More sure than I've ever been about anything. Vanessa's call came an hour later. Is this some kind of joke? You're getting married a month after me? At an island venue? How are you even paying for this, Caroline? Did you max out credit cards? Just come to the wedding, Vanessa. You'll see. The month flew by in a whirlwind of final preparations. The lodge looked spectacular, the restoration complete down to the last detail. The native gardens were in full summer bloom. The beach had been raked smooth, driftwood benches arranged in a semicircle facing the water. String lights were hung between the old-growth cedars. A local folk band was hired. A photographer who specialized in natural, unposed shots was booked. The morning of the wedding, I woke up in the lodge's master bedroom feeling profoundly calm. Alex was staying in the guest house according to tradition, and I had the space to myself to prepare. My dress was simple ivory cotton, handmade by a local artisan who worked with organic fabrics. No veil, just flowers from the island's garden in my hair. Guests began arriving by boat around 3 in the afternoon. I watched from the lodge window as they disembarked, their faces showing delight and surprise at the property's beauty. Bethany arrived with her family, giving me a huge hug and telling me I looked radiant. Dorothy came with her daughter, both of them teary-eyed at seeing the lodge restored to its former glory. My parents arrived looking confused and somewhat uncomfortable in their cocktail attire, overdressed for the casual atmosphere. Vanessa and Marcus were on the last boat, Vanessa's face tight with suspicion as she took in the impressive lodge, the manicured grounds, the obvious expense of the restoration. At 5:30, the helicopter appeared on the horizon, carrying the caterer's final supplies and 3 elderly guests who couldn't manage the boat ride. It landed in the clearing we prepared specifically for this purpose, its rotors kicking up dust and drawing every eye. I watched from the lodge porch as Vanessa's mouth literally fell open. Watched my mother grip my father's arm in shock. Watched the realization dawn on their faces that this property, this beautiful, expensive, carefully restored estate, was mine. The ceremony itself was everything I'd dreamed. Alex and I exchanged vows we'd written ourselves, standing barefoot in the sand as the sun painted the sky gold and pink. We promised to support each other's dreams, to protect the wild places we both loved, to build a life rooted in purpose rather than appearances. When we kissed as the sun touched the horizon, our 90 guests cheered with genuine joy. The reception was held in the lodge's great room, the massive stone fireplace lit despite the warm evening, candles everywhere, food served family style at long wooden tables. It was intimate and warm and real. People laughed and told stories and danced to folk music under the stars. Vanessa cornered me near the dessert table an hour into the reception. "You own this place," she said flatly. "You've owned it this whole time. Grandma Helen left it to me. I've been restoring it for 3 years. 3 years. You've been secretly wealthy for 3 years while letting us think you were barely scraping by in that studio apartment. I'm not wealthy. I'm comfortable. And I chose to live modestly because I wanted to invest in something meaningful rather than spend money to impress people." Her face cycled through emotions I couldn't quite read. "You let me mock you. You let me say you'd never afford a wedding like mine. You were right. I could never afford a wedding like yours because I'd never want one. This is who I am, Vanessa. I'm sorry if that's disappointing to you." My mother appeared then, her expression still stunned. "Caroline, I don't understand. Why didn't you tell us about this place? About your inheritance?" "Because I knew you'd try to control it. You'd have opinions about what I should do with it, how I should invest it, whether I should sell it. This way, it stayed mine." My father joined us, looking around the great room with what might have been respect. "You did this yourself? The restoration?" "With help from people who shared my vision. But yes, this is my project." For the first time in my life, I saw something in my parents' faces that looked almost like pride. Not the performative pride they showed when Vanessa achieved something publicly impressive, but genuine respect for work well done. The evening wound down around midnight with guests departing by boat back to Anacortes, many of them promising to return to visit the island. Alex and I stood on the dock watching the last boat disappear into the darkness, married and happy and exactly where we were meant to be. "No regrets?" Alex asked, pulling me close. "Not even one." Vanessa and my parents stayed in the guest house that night, unable to make the last boat. The next morning over coffee on the porch, Vanessa finally spoke what she'd been holding back. "I spent $300,000 on my wedding trying to prove I'd made it. You spent a fraction of that and created something that actually matters. I don't know whether to be impressed or furious." "You can be both," I said gently. "But maybe also consider that we were never in competition. You don't have to diminish me to feel successful." Something shifted in her expression then, a crack in the perfect facade. "I've been awful to you." "Yes, you have. I don't know how to be different." "Maybe start by being honest. With yourself and with Marcus. Ask yourself if you're building the life you actually want or the life you think you're supposed to want." She didn't answer, but I saw her glance back at the guest house where Marcus was still sleeping. Saw the uncertainty cross her face. That conversation would be hers to have in her own time. My parents left that morning with promises to visit again, to get to know Alex better, to try to understand the life I'd built. Whether they'd follow through remained to be seen, but for the first time, it didn't matter as much. I'd stopped needing their approval. Alex and I spent our first week as a married couple on the island, swimming and hiking and planning the future we'd build together. The property would become an environmental education center, just as we dreamed. We'd host school groups and research teams and anyone who wanted to learn about ecological restoration. Sometimes I thought about Vanessa's face when the helicopter landed, the shock and realization that I'd been living a completely different life than she'd imagined. But mostly I thought about the life ahead, the work we'd do, the difference we'd make. That was the real victory, not proving my family wrong but proving to myself that there were many ways to build a meaningful life. And sometimes, late at night with Alex asleep beside me and the sound of waves through the open window, I'd think about that moment at Vanessa's engagement party when she'd laughed and said I'd never afford a wedding like hers. She was right, I never could. Because the wedding I wanted, the life I wanted, couldn't be measured in dollars or status or other people's approval. It could only be measured in authenticity, purpose, and love. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.